Okay, like I said, we pick up right where we left off yesterday, and that bears a slight amount of review of the concepts that we were discussing. So let's do that quickly. Remember, in your notes, you should have not only a concept and its definition, possibly some expansion on that definition if we had some more notes, but also examples from Friday Night Lights. And for some of the concepts, we haven't taken a look at examples yet. We'll see them as we go through the book, but for the rest, should be able to get something. Loaded language, of course, was the language that we were looking at that conveys meaning through its connotative level as well as its denotative. And an author can pick from a wide variety of different words. Author often picks a word based upon its connotation, which helps us develop which of the three claims? Pathos, emotion. Now, I know a lot of students will say, oh, ethos, emotion, because of the connection with the E. Remember, pathos is the one that is emotion. Ethos is the one that is personal identity and credibility of the author. We're also taking a look at jargon and slang, which was yet another example of diction. That means word choice. But jargon and slang announces the identity of the speaker and specifically says, hey, come on into this community who trades in specific terminology of music or specific terminology of football. Or, if you don't belong in this community, be impressed that I do. And of course, slang works in a similar fashion, saying we belong in this informal community that understands its own culture. Formal, informal voice was very related to this as well. And we're talking about how the how the author approaches you personally. Does the author seem to be informal with you, using slang and other sorts of shortcuts, or does the author seem to affect a very formal voice, which would probably create a fair amount of authority? Once again, building which of the claims? Ethos, very good. Juxtaposition we hadn't taken a look at because one of our shining examples of that comes in Dreaming of Heroes, the chapter for tomorrow. And that is where you place two subjects right next to each other without explaining why necessarily you've placed them next to each other, just for the effect of their association. We saw here that with this specific poetic example that a couple people were going in a couple directions that seemed to make sense, and some other people were making crazy plots out of grandma cooking raisin cookies and all sorts of craziness, which once again speaks to the benefits and the drawbacks of this device. Since it's not clear, you are open to the interpretation of the audience. The fact that it's not clear provides what benefit? Yeah, the audience thinks about it, and they think in all sorts of directions, and that's often good. Because sometimes when you make connections clear for an audience, it locks down their thought process. Juxtaposition is a neat device because it can allow that thought process to flow. Characterization. Have we reached yet? This is right where we were? Okay. Characterization. This should not be unfamiliar at all. We're talking about literary character development, but it bears repeating, and I repeat it all the time from the beginning of the year. If you're talking about characterization, you are identifying what? What are you identifying? The personality of a character, their traits. Thank you, Daniel. Traits. You're not saying, there is Daniel. We know there is Daniel. You are saying, Daniel is a responsible student. There's a difference. Okay. Responsible is a character trait. Daniel's existence is a mere fact of the plot exposition. Give me a character trait of somebody in Friday Night Lights. Oh, Daniel? It's okay. Shelby? Booby is self-confident. Excellent. Do we have evidence? Evidence, evidence, evidence. Self-confident is good because it is a character trait. How do I know? How do I know self-confidence is a character trait or being confident? That is true, Josiah. However, I was looking for a simpler, kind of shortcutty answer. What part of speech are all character traits? Part of speech. Remember, there are 8 parts of speech. They're over there on the wall. Just shout it out if you know it. Adjective. Thank you very much. Daniel, going 3 for 3 today. Nice work. An adjective describes somebody. He is confident. He is self-confident. It's an adjective. Shelby, what you got? Well, hold on a second. Is it the same thing?
Well, not really. Like, if you're confident, sometimes you may be cocky. Like, I am better than you, you know?
Look at this for a moment. No, I'm going to loaded language. Confident and cocky are 2 different words. You're saying, well, denotatively, they kind of mean the same thing, right? Having an assurance of self. Connotatively, they have some different meanings. Cocky is negative. It's saying that you are arrogant, that you like to push it in other people's faces, whereas confident is just could be quiet and could be humble confidence. So if we're talking about those 2 different words, you got to be careful. When you're going back here to characterization, are we talking about him being cocky or are we talking about him being confident? Class, what do you think? Is he cocky or is he confident? Both. Thank you. That helps. Come on, let's make a decision, all right? You have evidence, Jordan. Give me, you don't even have to give a page reference, but give me something that you remember about Booby that says confident. Okay, so Jordan has an image of Booby Miles, the watermelon feed, that speaks of confidence, that speaks of his reliance in his ability, not of shoving that ability in other people's faces in a cocky sort of manner. Josiah. 51 in the big book. What you got? Was that kind of what you were thinking about, Jordan? Okay. What do you get from that, folks? Do you get cockiness? Do you get confidence? What phrase in there speaks to me of cockiness? It's the God reference that really gives it to me. Only God could have given him an ability so strong.
A lot of people, I don't know, I don't think that it's cognitive because, well, I mean, it's a personal opinion. I think you know, thank God personally for some of his athletic abilities, and I think that's more reverence.
Oh, nice. I like this.
That's more humbleness.
Humility. I like this. This is good. This is discussion based upon evidence. You can go anywhere you want. You know me. You make me happy as long as you're supporting with evidence and some sort of reasonable interpretation thereof. That's good. All right. But we're building traits. Let's move on. You know what characterization is. We could talk about the characterization all day. Jake, you have a question? Oh, no, we're moving on to another idea. The other idea, sorry, Jake, by the way, you can explore other characters, and I see you looking at Dreaming of Heroes there. We're going to look at that tomorrow. Evidence. Evidence is fairly easy. However, I want you to realize that when we're talking about evidence, we're talking about researched evidence. I'm not necessarily talking about facts that everybody knows to support some sort of claim. I'm talking about the use of researched evidence. Now, the researched evidence you saw in Odessa was usually what type of research evidence? We did see newspaper articles, so we saw quotations from newspaper articles. What else did we see? I'm sorry? Statistics, it was one of the areas. Researched evidence. Okay, if loaded language is building pathos, what is evidence building? Okay, good. So it can add your credibility because you've done your research and you're proving that you've done it. Good. We can build ethos. Remember, we can build more than one at a time. What else are you building? Tori, you've got an answer. That's right, logos. When you prove a point logically and rationally, you use evidence. You guys learned that from your debate unit. So we're building logos and we're building ethos, as Daniel identifies correctly. But make sure that you see some sort of evidence thrown out there that seems to be researchable, like the author did his or her research, thus lending credibility. By the way, sometimes the absence of some of these devices can help you criticize an author. The absence of evidence, or the absence of citation of that evidence, could help decrease credibility and affect the claim of ethos. Right, we did that with the current events report. Remember, you got a quotation or some sort of statement. You've got to provide that research, otherwise less likely to believe you. This is a variation on evidence. Voice of authority. Just by looking at the term, what do you think I'm talking about with voice of authority? Jasmine, what do you think? Good from whom? Not necessarily. You've got the right idea. Voice speaks to me of opinion. Sarah? Not necessarily, because the narrator and the author are often the same. Jordan? Not necessarily, and probably not. Some sort of powerful figure, usually some sort of knowledgeable expert. So voice of authority occurs when I'm using authoritative resources. Not just a research fact, but I'm using somebody that has some amount of credibility. Let me put it to you in a very simple way. I'm writing a debate, and I can cite either the Southview Catalyst or I can cite the New York Times. Which one do I cite? Well, let's say they both present the same fact. Why do I cite the New York Times? More powerful, bigger company, more reliable, more credible. In other words, it's not only helping my logos, it's also helping my ethos quite a bit because it's building my credibility. We use authoritative sources because we like to take that authority, it's almost like robbing it from that person and giving it to ourselves. When Bissinger uses a quotation that supports his point that is authoritative, he has stolen that person's credibility and reliability and given it to himself. Example? Daniel? The guy who says this is hell, though, is just a regular GP, a regular general practitioner doctor. He's just a regular doctor. But remember, he's not an expert on culture, community, or civics. He's an expert on medicine. So if he were speaking on medicine, yes. Do you see the difference? We have to have his authority in that specific area. Oh, interesting. So if Coach Gaines was speaking about football matters, and I quoted him, then certainly that would seem to lend authority because he's an expert in that area. Do you know how in court some people are declared expert witnesses? One of the attorneys would move, I move that this person be declared an expert witness because this person has such and such a degree and so many years experience in identifying fingerprints. And therefore, everything that they say is more reliable than mere opinion. It is now fact because it's the opinion of an authoritative source. Same sort of thing. So we're looking to match authority to the subject matter. Yes? Which one do you think would be most reliable there, Connor? Which of those magazines? Money Magazine? And why are you saying Money Magazine is reliable? Interesting. So Connor's saying that a nationally recognized magazine that focuses on economics has authority because economics is such an important factor in society. And you want to gauge a society, gauge it based upon economic factors. Therefore, Money Magazine is excellent. It's good. What page is that in the small book? Page 12 in the small book, we've got Money Magazine. Anybody remember the other magazine that he cited? What was the other? I think there was one right next to the Money Magazine. Tori? Psychology Today. Tori, do you think that's, do you think he gains from that when he's talking about what it's like to live in Odessa? Does he gain credibility when he cites Psychology Today talking about what it's like to live in Odessa? Well, let me put it to you this way, Tori. Would you be likely to trust a nationally recognized psychology magazine when talking about what it's like to live in a certain place? I think so. Sounds about right to me. Because they're supposed to be experts or collecting the words of experts on issues of mental health, issues of social health. So I would imagine that would work. Sorry? Okay, we won't have that discussion. Let's move over to something simple that we've already talked about. Imagery, of course, words that convey sense impressions. Jake, what was the example he gave us yesterday? It was such a wonderful image.
That was the sand one. I think it was on page 31.
31.
In the big book.
Big book. Mouthful of gritty sand. 32.
Yeah.
Read it.
So rather it was true enough, most people said they had first come out here during a sandstorm, meaning their first taste or ethos had generally been a mouthful of gritty sand.
Excellent. And Jake, which of the three claims are we really developing through the mouthful of gritty sand?
Pathos.
Pathos. Very good. And what sort of emotion are we developing?
Would be like sort of like gross.
Excellent. Disgust. Yeah. Disgust or discomfort. Exaggeration is somewhat closely related to imagery at times. Yeah. Anytime you're taking something and you are magnifying its proportions, or you're minimizing its proportions, you're making it extraordinarily strong or small, or you're making it extraordinarily large. Increasing or decreasing the proportions of a subject. This often happens in small, subtle ways. One of the examples we talked about with loaded language also could be considered a degree of exaggeration. Anybody recall? Yeah. This must be hell. It's exaggeration. Let's see. A supposed realm of eternal torment and damnation. That's what Odessa's like. Sounds to me like that's a little bit exaggerated. Probably not that bad. After all, they do have a Walmart. Thank you for laughing at my joke. Personal testimony. We've talked about this also. Personal testimony. Subjective quotations from interview subjects. What does subjective mean? Opinion-based. From their own personal point of view, what's the antonym of subjective? If you are not being subjective, what are you being? Objective. Objective means unbiased, impartial, rational. If they're subjective, what's their value? Speak. Oh, that's true. So if I carefully select all the quotations that definitely agree with me, but doesn't that sound like I'm doing something unfair just by selecting people who agree with me? What's the power of of personal testimony? What's the power of that man's personal testimony, Cohn's personal testimony in the this place must be hell issue? What? But he's not an authority on civic issues. So where does the authority derive? Okay, it helps me understand the emotion. That's true. But why would I listen to him? Because he's from there. He has firsthand experience. I used this example in third period today. Imagine that I write 2 articles for the Catalyst, both about the cell phone policy and how it affects students at Southview. One article crunches numbers. One article looks at disciplinary referrals, looks at rates of cell phone ownership, and so on. The other one gives personal testimony from students. Which of those would you find to be a better story about cell phone usage in Southview? I'm sorry? Why? One's got statistics, the other has a bunch of quotations. Okay, so one benefit that you're looking at, Josiah, nobody wants to read a bunch of numbers, is that we have, once again, a human connection. We like to hear people talking. We like to listen to them. Now, if you're sitting there listening to a lecture and saying, no, Mr. Clarkson, actually not. Yes, we like to get in conversations. As long as they're not long, drawn out, and boring, we do like to hear people talk. Sarah. That's right. So there is a primary source strength to it. That personal testimony eliminates the number crunchers and the analysts. It gets right to the point. Shelby.
I was thinking like the statistics because it's like it's depending on who you're interviewing because if it's like kids like us, of course we're gonna say we like the cell, we want cell phones. So I think it'd get boring after a while reading, same thing.
Shelby, you're absolutely correct. Therefore, what is the best of both worlds?
Well, both.
Merging them both, absolutely, and that's what Bissinger's doing, right? Yes, very good. So it's an excellent point that you make. The perfect article would merge both statistics that are rational and give me that sort of credibility with the subjective quotations gives me the primary source strength, and the personal human connection. Conflict's pretty easy because we're still talking about literary oppositions, and we're still talking about the internal versus external conflicts, the social, personal, environmental, and so on. Let's talk about Booby Miles. Booby Miles faces a number of different conflicts. Can you tell me one of them? Okay, you almost have two conflicts in there. Let's talk about the knee first. What kind of conflict is the knee? I understand, but which of the conflicts? So we've got internal, we've got true, external conflict with what? Is it not person versus person? His knee's not another person, so there you go. I like that. Good job, Jake. Booby Miles versus the knee is an environmental or a nature conflict, talking about just the natural fact of his wound, of his injury. What other conflicts does he face? Very good. And for what reasons, Jasmine? Yeah.
Because he was expected to be like a very good, player for the team.
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of pressure on him. He ends up on you now, and he's not going to be able to play and live up to their standards.
Good. Social expectations of his performance. He doesn't live up to them, and therefore he has a problem with Odessa society. Why else does Odessa dislike Booby Miles? Because he's black. Thank you very much. Ample evidence throughout the book shows that Odessa is facing race conflict. That Odessa is racist itself, in large part, and that Booby Miles faces this. Oh, the schools were segregated until the early 80s. Can you believe that? I mean, your study of history, you know that desegregation was happening when? When did desegregation start in this country? After World War II. What was board? The early 50s? It was during the Eisenhower administration because Eisenhower's the one who ordered the troops in to make sure to segregate the schools. So pre-Kennedy, pre-60s, we're talking about desegregation. Forced by federal troops. Odessa was able to hold out until the 80s because, of course, they live in a alien world that it doesn't seem we have easier time getting to the moon, I think, than getting to Odessa. Booby Miles versus knee, person versus nature. Booby Miles versus Odessa, person versus society. Facing anything else? Comer? No, Chris Comer. The junior who takes his position when he can no longer perform. Person versus person. What's the end effect? No, the end effect on you, the reader. Okay, well, you don't really get much of Comer, to tell the truth. Um, you'll get a little bit, but I'm not sure that we're focusing on Comer because, look, Jake, we've got Booby Miles is common here. I would say that all three of these are developing some message about Booby Miles. What message about Booby Miles are we getting? There you go. Which claim are you developing? Pathos. We feel sympathy. Why? Because we feel sympathy for the victims. I'll ask you again. Does Bissinger like football? Does Bissinger like these boys? Is he critical about all of this? He's critical about Odessa, right? He's going to be critical about the football program. Does he still want you to understand that at the core, these are likable boys and this is a good thing? I would say so. And where's my evidence? Right here. And the fact that he develops Booby Miles as suffering from so many conflicts that seem to be out of his control or forced upon him. That's it. That's all we have for the list. And here's what I want you to consider from here on out. Every time you pull up an example, every time you pull up an example to support a claim, I want you thinking about which category it belongs in. And if you find that you have one that doesn't seem to belong in a category, then please let me know. Either I'll say, one, yeah, actually it's in this category. Did you look at it this way? And you'll say, oh yeah, that is loaded language. Or two, you might have found a new type of device, and I'll say, hey, you found this. Or three, it's not actually a detail that you can use. It's something else. So continue to categorize what you've got. Questions?